Now, I think there's a lot to be said for um, acting on criminal damage. The Criminal Damage Act of 1971 is about the intentional or the reckless destruction of property belonging to someone else. So, for example, vandalism, graffiti, smashing windows, arson, deliberately setting fire to someone, or cutting down someone's trees without permission. And usually, there's some sort of summary defense or something based on the value or the intent. And so, for example, if someone went into my garden, which unfortunately someone did, and cut down my trees, this would be criminal damage. And the fact that police or insurers might shrug it off as civil is often a question of resources or proving intent. It's not the law itself. A civil case of trespass, well, you can't have civil trespass, but of damages may be easier to pursue. Actually, you can have trespass. You can't prosecute a trespasser because it's a civil case. It may be easier to pursue, but criminal liability still exists. The Terrorism Act, as defined in 2000, the key definition there is the use of a threat of action designed to influence the government or intimidate the public for the purpose of advancing a political, religious, or ideological cause, and which involves serious violence, serious damage to property, endangering life, or creating a serious risk to public health or safety. Examples of this would be bombings, plots to kill civilians, attacks designed to coerce government policy. The critical point here is it has to be political or ideological as a motive with serious harm or threat. And I don't think the attack on Bryce Norton, inconvenient though it may be, and embarrassing for the RAF, amounts to serious harm or a serious threat. It gets blurred because graffiti on an aircraft is terrorism in some way, and chopping down trees, even though it's clearly criminal, is shrugged off. Graffiti on an aircraft is serious because of aviation security laws, and even a superficial marking can be treated as threatening sabotage in the context of aircraft safety. The system is hypersensitive because of past terrorist attacks, but it doesn't automatically make it terrorism under the Terrorist Act unless prosecutors can show the ideological motive and the intent to intimidate or coerce. In practice, though, police and prosecutors seem to overcharge in Britain to signal deterrence or to access broader police powers like searching and detention and holding people in detention and so on. I think in the case of the Palestinian action, we should be charging these people for damage, not prescribing them as terrorists. Palestinian action has targeted property, that is, arms factories, often with damage or trespass, but their actions are explicitly political, so prosecutors may argue that they meet the Terrorism Act test. However, the question is about proportionality. Damaging property to protest at arms sales is not the same as bombing civilians. Prescribing them as a terrorist organization under Section 2 of the Act gives the Home Secretary extreme powers, that is, membership is a criminal offence. But I think this is a category error. Prescription should be reserved for groups with a clear commitment to lethal violence against civilians, something like the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. There is a case for prescribing membership of the IRGC. It's a more compelling example, and the British government has been much more reluctant to use this. The IRGC is a paramilitary arm of the Iranian state and has supported armed groups like, for example, Hezbollah, conducting extraterritorial attacks and assassinations. And the US and other countries treat them as a terrorist organization because they use violence systematically to advance their ideological aims. And here the definition of terrorism applies far more keenly. There are calls at the moment for the IDF to be proscribed. The Israeli Defense Forces are a state military. So allegations of war crimes or disproportionate violence are matters for international law, but they are not a a non-state group using violence to coerce or intimidate civilians to achieve political change in the sense of a terrorism law. And so prescribing a national army would be absurd under UK terrorism legislation, as it would mean criminalising relations with a recognised state. So we should prosecute vandalism, trespass, and sabotage under ordinary criminal law. We should not use terrorism powers to silence dissent or non-violent protest, and we should reserve a prescription for organisations that threaten violence on a large scale to pursue ideological goals. I'm not sure that the Palestinian action prescription is justified on those grounds. When the state muddies these categories, it weakens both the fight against genuine terrorism and the credibility of criminal law.